So this vault, this arched chamber, this arch of heaven is also where we, linked to Freemasonry, is where we get the arch. And at the direct center of that arch, the most crucial component of the arch is the key, what's known as the keystone. And this next image that we'll take a look at is created to illustrate that the pons, which connects to the optic thalamus in the human brain, identically corresponds to the ancient hieroglyphic depictions of the deity called Ptah, or Ta, if you use the silent P. Pitta, which was phonetically pronounced Pitta, and I'll portray how it's more than just iconography and images or images that connect Ptah as the ophthalmos. In Egyptian mythology, Ptah, vocalized again as Pitta in ancient Egyptian, is the demiurge of Memphis, the god of creation, the arts, fertility, and craftsmanship. He is considered the demiurge who existed before all other things, and by his willfulness thought the world into existence. It was first conceived by thought and realized by the word. Pitta conceives the world by thought of his heart and gives life through the magic of his word. That which Pitta commanded was created, with which the constituents of nature, fauna, and flora are contained. A document known as the Memphite Theology shows the god Pitta responsible for creation of the universe by thought and by the word. And it's funny how this directly links to the Genesis creation story, long predating the Genesis creation story. The demiurge is from Latinized Greek demiurgos, literally public or skilled worker, the deity of craftsmanship, artisan. Demiurgos comes from demos, meaning common people. See demotic plus orgos, meaning the root word ergos, meaning work, which is linked to the etymology of the word organ. So the pineal gland and the pituitary gland are both organs, which does work. Hence the word ergos, as in demiurgos, or a small organ, which does work. So the pituitary gland is also linked to pitta, pituitary, pitta, a small organ which does work. This is an excerpt from Antoine Gigol's Crown and the Hero of the Sea. All this is leading us to the rudimentary eye in the human brain. The pitta linked to the word ophthalmos. Ophthalmos is ancient Greek meaning eye, as in the all-seeing eye, the pineal gland. The pitta that Iamblichus is writing about in his book De Mysteris Egyptorium, as the creative intellect, the Lord of the truth and knowledge, the pitta who will become pitta. All the past and all the secrets are in the words and the sounds. A long journey from the origins for the most sacred artifact of Egypt. The word ophthalmos, secularly described as being from the root words ops, meaning eye, see optic. A form related to thalamus, meaning inner room or chamber, or in other words, the third ventricle, the innermost chamber, the Holy of Holies. So ophthalmos, meaning eye, is a compound word composing of eye and thalamus, meaning inner room chamber of the inner eye. And I've gotten into arguments with Stephen Banker's of Spirit Science and Metaphysics website over all this theology and the etymology. He claims that ophthalmos can't possibly be talking about the pineal gland, can't possibly be referring to the third eye, and it simply is used in the context regarding the external eyes. But that is not true at all, and I will prove that through the etymology. See, again, they say that it comes from the word ops, meaning eye, plus thalamus. They would have you believe that ophthalmos is a compound word of ops plus thalamus, but that's not the case at all. The prefix of the word-forming element ophi, O-P-H-I, however, refers to a serpent or snake. So look at the word again. It's ophthalmos, not ophthalmos. From the point of view of biological evolution, the pineal gland represents a kind of atrophied photoreceptor, which means a receiver of light. In the epithalamus of some species of amphibians and reptiles such as snakes, it's linked to a vestigial organ known as the parietal eye. A parietal eye, also known as a third eye or pineal eye, is photoreceptive, meaning receptive to light. It's a receiver of light, and it's sensitive to light, and it emits its own light, and is associated with the pineal gland, regulating circadian rhythmicity, sleep and wake cycle, and hormone production for thermal regulation, body temperature regulation. The very fact that thalamus alone means inner chamber is a dead giveaway that it's referring to the third eye, the Holy of Holies, as it corresponds to Solomon's temple, the third ventricle of the human brain, which is direct midline between the left and right ventricles, or the twin, which are known as the twin pillars. So it's the third pillar of Freemasonry, which stands directly between the two pillars of the sun and the moon, the left and the right hemispheres, the left and the right ventricle, the twin pillars, of which the third pillar stands directly in the center, hence the third eye and the third ventricle. So refer to this amulet of King Tutankhamun's tomb, the amulet of the Urea serpent, where the Urea symbol was made to represent the goddess Wadjet, which was the ancient Egyptian serpent goddess. It was a serpent deity. And what this amulet is depicting with the Uraeus is it's depicting snake eyes.
Snakes have sight beyond sight because they can see in the infrared spectrum. So in other words, they have heat vision. They can sense infrared heat. So they have thermal vision. So they can see beyond the typical spectrum of visible light that humans can see. So they have the sight beyond sight. And they sense this heat around them by taking in, they smell through their tongue, but they also send information into the heat-sensing membranes, which allows them to have the thermal vision. And these two cones, or these cones of vision, overlap directly at the center, leaving a perfectly visible Vesica Piscis geometry visual pattern.
The eye of the snake, the third eye, the all-seeing eye, the parietal eye, a vestigial remnant of the reptilian anatomy, the reptilian physiology, which the human brain is segmented into three main segments. You have the pons, or in other words, the brain stem, which regards to survival and direct basic needs, and then you have the midbrain, which relates to emotions, and which is the mammalian brain, which relates to emotions and temperature regulation and hormone production. And then you have the newest development of the brain, which is the neocortex, which is related to higher thinking and higher cognitive abilities, rational functioning, problem solving. So the reptilian portion of the brain is referring to the most basic urges of human nature, which is survival, and the basic needs of human survival. Again, the inner eye, the third eye, as everyone knows by now, the pineal gland, is regulated by the Kundalini serpent energy of the body's central nervous ganglia. In other words, gangs or networks of glial cells, of glia, which are neural cells, which represents enlightenment, or in other words, light within the mind. The serpent energy represents life, rebirth, fertility, divinity, and royalty, as shown by the basilisk, which means king serpent, which comes from the root word of basil, which means king or royalty. Basil or basil, king or royalty, which is exactly why the king pharaohs wore the Urea's cobra, or in other words, the king cobra on the third eye, which just so happens that the pons, the brainstem, and the thalamus portion of the inner brain is known as the reptilian complex, which corresponds to the very base of animal functioning, the basic animal nature, or in other words, the base, which means the very base of the human brain, the bottommost segment of the human brain, which relates directly to survival and instinct, which is why it's called the basal ganglia or the basal ganglia. Literally means the base of the brain. It's the most basic ganglia of the human brain, which is why the base of the brain, or the basal ganglia, looks exactly like a hooded cobra standing on its tail, standing erect. Exactly like the Urea's cobra on the pharaoh's third eye stands erect, which is a direct representation of the pons. It's a direct representation of the reptilian complex of the human brain. It's a direct representation of royalty, of the king's chamber, of the third ventricle, the serpent, the snake eye.
And so, of course, throughout ancient cultures, especially Hindu, Vedic, Indian culture, as well as ancient Egyptian and all throughout esoteric occult Hollywood symbolism, this is why we find the Nagas, or the serpent kings, or the serpent gods, the shining ones.